Okay, let's make a settings file on disk. We will need this if we're going to save our settings. So let's first stub it out. File, get settings file. Next, we will look for a folder in the user application data directory, specifically a folder that is the name of our app. We'll do that like this. Auto main dir equals file, get special location, and we want to look for files, special location type. We want the user application data directory. And now we want a get child file, and we want, we can get the name of our app via project info. We got project name, but we have to turn this into a string. Or do we? It's green. Well, let's just be safe and turn it into a string. String. Now, if that folder doesn't exist, if main.dir exists, if it doesn't exist, let's make it. main.dir.create, and we want the directory, and let's show it to us. And we will eventually move this line. main.dir.reveal to user. All right, now we can make a settings file. Auto settings file equals main.dir.get child file. We want the same thing. String project info, project name. Project info, project name. We want this string plus settings, like that. So we're gonna make a folder called TaskQueue, like this. Whoops. We're gonna make a folder called that inside our user application data directory. And then inside of that folder, we're gonna make a file called project, or we're gonna look for a file named taskqueue.settings, like that. And we'll do the same thing if settings file dot exists as file. If it doesn't exist, make it settings file dot create. And now that we've made it, we can just return it. Return settings file. Now that we have a file on disk, let's write some data to it. The function value tree to XML string is so useful that it makes sense for us to use a value tree to store our app settings. So writing and reading to and from disk is super easy. So we'll put that right here above update bounds with our other members. Value tree settings. And then right here we can do auto. We can get our settings file, auto settings file equals get settings file. Now we can replace the contents of that settings file with our settings tree. Settings file dot, and there's a replace function. Replace with text, and we can just do settings dot to XML string. Let's show it to ourselves. Settings file dot reveal to user. We'll remove this in a little bit. All right, so one of our next steps is to actually write the window bounds to the value tree and then drag resize our window after we have the settings file open in a text editor. So let's store these window bounds first. We'll do settings.setProperty. We'll just call it X, and we want our window bounds.getX. We don't have an undo manager, so that'll just be that. And we'll repeat these same steps for the X value, the Y value, the width, and the height. So we want X, Y, W, and H. And here we want get Y. Here we want get width. And here we want get height. Let's run this and look at our settings file in something like Visual Studio Code or TextEdit. Probably Visual Studio Code because it'll do syntax highlighting. All right, there's our settings file. And let's open with Visual Studio Code. Okay, there's our X, Y, and width and height. And let's go back to our app. Let's put that settings thing right on screen again and go back here. And if we change this, oh, look at that. Look at that, it's changing there. Let's resize this guy. Awesome. All right, very cool. The only annoying thing is that it keeps showing this, keeps revealing this to user. It's probably this thing right here. We should, we did it once, we saw it work, we can get rid of that line. Now that we have a window bounds stored to disk, let's restore it. Let's stub this out right after the load save settings from disk. This right here. Void load settings from disk. All right, that's our stub. So number one, let's get the file. Just copy this line. Okay, we've got our settings file. So let's imagine that this is the first time we have run our run this application, and there's no settings file, so there is no data to load. So let's check if settings file dot exists as file. If it exists, then let's assume that there is some data to load, right? That would go here, load data from disk. And then eventually we're going to want to call set bounds here. We're going to eventually want to call set bounds dot dot dot. If there was position data that was pulled from the settings file, and if there's not, we're just going to want to call center with size the way we are currently doing it. That's what we'll do. That's what we would do here. If there's data that we can pull, then we'll call set bounds with it. Otherwise, we'll call center with size. So with that said, let's fill in what to do if the settings file exists on the disk. This will go here. We will do file input stream, and we want this one file to read, which is our settings file. Well, this is FIS. Now we can do auto tree equals value tree from XML, and we want FIS dot read. Let's see, this one, read entire stream as string. All right, it's kind of annoying that we originally used settings.toXML string, but we have to use an intermediate file input stream to read it back. So once we have that, we just need to check if it's valid. If tree.is valid, like this, then we can just do settings equals tree. Once we have done that, now we can use value tree get property because it lets us supply a default value to return, and we can use that for the width and the height. So we can do int w equals settings.get property. We're looking for the w. We're looking for this guy right here. If our settings file does not exist and we did not pull a valid value tree from it, then we want our width to be 600. So this way, int w is either going to be what is stored on disk, or it's going to be this value of 600. And we'll do the same thing for the height. Int h is 8, and we'll do 600 by 400. Now, unfortunately, we can't do that for the x and y, so we have to check if the tree contains those properties. So if settings.has property, we're looking for that x, and settings.has property, looking for that y value. If it has those, then we can pull it. Int x equals settings x. We can grab it like that. Same for the y. Int y equals settings y. And now we can call set bounds like we said. Set bounds x, y, w, h. If we don't have this x and y, else send tree with size, because juice is written by British people and that's how they spell center. W, H. All right, we got this load settings from disk function. We just need to call it in our constructor. Let's comment out our current center with size and instead call load settings from disk. Let's go to that Finder window and delete our settings file so it gets created. And then let's run this. So this is going to be basically simulating what would happen if we ran this on somebody else's computer for the first time. Okay, did that reveal the Finder window? Well, I didn't close it, so it's still there. All right, it opens up in the middle of the screen, which is good. Let's move it around, let's resize it, let's quit, and let's reopen. So we'll put it here. I'm going to shrink it this way, and let's quit. It should be in this exact same position. So quit and rerun. There it is. Awesome. Excellent. You know what that means. That means we get to go to main component and check off remember the window position and size when you close and reopen the app. Done. And while we are here, let's make a commit that we put this got this feature done. Changes. Let's see. Stage. What did we do here? Oh yeah. All right, so we did a couple things. So we implemented, implemented undo, redo, and remember window position after quitting. I think that's everything. Let's see. That's the undo redo. There's our undo redo, and then here's all of our other stuff. All right, cool. Yeah, let's commit that. Great. Another feature done.